As Israeli jets hammer Lebanon even under supposed truce, is Tehran now branding the whole ceasefire framework as a deception that was never meant to protect its allies? When Iran says its fingers remain on the trigger as Lebanon comes under fresh attack, is it signaling that every new strike risks blowing up the fragile truce with Washington? With Iranian leaders warning that more hits on Lebanon could kill the ceasefire outright, is Israel's next raid the one that turns talks into open war again? As Tehran tells the US it must choose ceasefire or war via Israel, not both, is Iran daring Washington to finally decide whether it owns Israel's Lebanon campaign? If Trump once called Iran's 10-point proposal a workable basis, is Tehran now declaring that same framework dead, broken by drone incursions and bombs on Lebanon before talks even began? With Iranian leaders citing drone incursions, Lebanon strikes, and nuclear red lines, is Tehran setting up its case that further talks under these conditions are simply unreasonable? Iran is now openly tying any ceasefire with Washington to a full halt in Israeli strikes on Lebanon, folding Beirut's fate directly into its deal with the US. On April 9, Tehran issued a fresh ultimatum after IDF raids hit Hezbollah fighters and infrastructure, warning that such moves threaten the entire ceasefire track. President Masoud Pezeshkian went public to warn that Israel's actions could end truce talks altogether if they continue unchecked. He accused Israel and its backers of deception, saying the Lebanon strikes show a lack of real commitment to any agreements on paper. Pezeshkian said, and I quote, "Israel's renewed incursion into Lebanon is a blatant violation of the initial ceasefire agreement. This is a dangerous sign of deception and lack of commitment to potential agreements. The continuation of these actions will render negotiations meaningless. Our fingers remain on the trigger. Iran will never abandon its Lebanese sisters and brothers." Unquote. Iran's parliament speaker Mohammad Bagher Ghalibaf has backed up the president, issuing his own sharp warning over Lebanon. He insists that Lebanon, and the entire so-called resistance axis, must be treated as an inseparable part of any ceasefire framework, not an optional add-on. Ghalibaf said, and I quote, "1. Lebanon and the entire resistance axis, as Iran's allies, form an inseparable part of the ceasefire. Point 1. 10-point proposal. 2. PM Shahbaz Sharif publicly and clearly stressed the Lebanon issue. There is no room for denial and backtracking. 3. Ceasefire violations carry explicit costs and strong responses. Extinguish the fire immediately." Unquote. These warnings follow a stark choice laid out by Iran's foreign minister, who says Washington can't sit on the fence any longer. On April 8, Abbas Araghchi said bluntly that the US must choose a real ceasefire or continued war via Israel, but not both at once. Araghchi said, and I quote, "The Iran-US ceasefire terms are clear and explicit. The US must choose ceasefire or continued war via Israel. It cannot have both. The world sees the massacres in Lebanon. The ball is in the US court, and the world is watching whether it will act on its commitments." Unquote. Ghalibaf now accuses Washington of breaking the very 10-point framework that Trump himself once called a workable basis for talks. Ghalibaf said, and I quote, "The deep historical distrust we hold toward the United States stems from its repeated violations of all forms of commitments, a pattern that has regrettably been repeated once again. As the President of the United States has clearly stated in his Truce, the Islamic Republic of Iran's 10-point proposal is a workable basis on which to negotiate and the main framework for these talks. However, 3 clauses of this proposal have been violated so far. 1. Non-compliance with the first clause of the 10-point proposal regarding the ceasefire in Lebanon, a commitment that Prime Minister Shahbaz Sharif has also explicitly referred to and declared as an immediate ceasefire everywhere, including Lebanon and other regions, effective immediately. 2. The entry of an intruding drone into Iran airspace, which was destroyed in the city of La in Fars province, in clear violation of the clause prohibiting any further violation of Iran airspace. 3. Denial of Iran's right to enrichment, which was included in 6th clause of the framework. Now, the very workable basis on which to negotiate has been openly and clearly violated, even before the negotiations began. In such situation, a bilateral ceasefire or negotiations is unreasonable." Unquote. On April 8, Pezeshkian told France's Emmanuel Macron that Lebanon's security is non-negotiable for Tehran in any regional deal. He argued that Iran's acceptance of a ceasefire concept showed responsibility and a willingness to pursue diplomatic solutions, if others do the same. Lebanon itself is now demanding clarity on what the ceasefire really covers, as Israeli strikes continue around Beirut. On April 9th, Prime Minister Nawaf Salam phoned Pakistan's Shahbaz Sharif to press for answers on whether Lebanon is formally inside the Iran war ceasefire. Salam reportedly asked Islamabad to confirm that Lebanon is included in the ceasefire terms Iran and Pakistan have been promoting. His request came after deadly Israeli strikes that Lebanese officials say have killed more than 200 people in recent days. Tensions escalated as Donald Trump warned Iran to comply with the ceasefire terms or face military action. Trump renewed his threats to use unprecedented force if Tehran did not fully honor what he called the real agreement. In a post on Truth Social, Trump said all U.S. ships, aircraft, and military personnel would remain around Iran. The warning came just days after a two-week ceasefire was agreed between Israel and Iran on April 7th. According to reports, the ceasefire conditions required Iran to reopen the Strait of Hormuz, a demand Tehran reportedly resisted. At the same time, Israeli strikes on Lebanon sparked fresh disputes over whether Lebanon was included in the truce. U.S. Vice President J.D. Vance later admitted there had been a legitimate misunderstanding over the geographic scope of the ceasefire. This also comes after Trump called a 10-point plan circulated by media fake in another Truth Social post.
I think the Iranians thought that the ceasefire included Lebanon, and it just didn't. We never made that promise. We never indicated that was going to be the case. What we said is that the ceasefire would be focused on Iran, and the ceasefire would be focused on America's allies, both Israel and the Gulf Arab states. Now, that said, the Israelis, as I understand it, again, I'm supposed to get a fuller report when I get on the plane, have actually offered to be, frankly, to check themselves a little bit in Lebanon because they want to make sure that our negotiation is successful. Fundamentally, the Iranians have got to take the next step, or the president has a lot of options to go back to the war. The more that they're willing to give us, I think the more they're going to get things out of this negotiation. I encourage the Iranians to come to the table seriously. We've seen some signs that they're going to do that. We've seen some signs of bravado. Fundamentally, we're in a good spot. They're reopening the straits. We have a ceasefire. And frankly, if they break their end of the bargain, then they're going to see some serious consequences.